Well, it seems like everyone is mostly in, and so I am going to have Ruba, who is going to be one of our moderators tonight. She's going to give an introduction. I'll briefly introduce myself. I'm Hannah Forty. I'm an attorney in Hibbing, and I work for the Previch Law Office and the Public Defender's Office. And so I'll turn it over to Ruba.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Ruva Tsoka. I am a Leap for Minnesota Fellow, and I'll be one of the moderators for today's event. Just to begin, I'd like to kind of lay out what is to be expected for tonight. It'll just be a brief introduction for me, and then we will follow in with the panelist portion of tonight, and that'll consist of community members as well as members of the court, who I will introduce in just a little bit. And then we want to reserve the last half hour of today's event for action planning. So we will encourage anyone who is in call to share their thoughts or ideas that they have to help make court system a more inclusive and inclusive space for everyone involved. I do want to point out that we will also be offering captioning as well as ASL interpretation for today's event, and the links will be dropped into the chat by Ann Jinkala or one of the captioners in just a little bit. Can see if I can copy and paste it, if not. But other than that, I would like to, introduce the panelists as well. For the community members, we do have a new member who's willing to speak for tonight, as opposed to the last event. It will be Sarafia. She's a co-founder of VIMA, and she can introduce herself a little bit more once we move into the panelist portion. Other than that, we also have Jay, board member of VIMA. He was also at the last event. And we have Shauna, another board member, and Keith Coward, a community member. And on the court side of the system, we have Judge Friday, who was also at last event. And then we also have Mark Mulich from Public Defenders, Amy Turnquist from Court Administration, and Kim Mackey at County Attorney. And then let's see if I have any other housekeeping things that I want to cover before we jump right into the panelist portion where completely forgot about the pigeonhole. We will be offering members to anonymously drop questions using the pigeonhole link that we had last time, and that was just dropped into the chat by Hannah Forty. So if you would like to ask questions, then you can use that without feeling concerned of showing your face or doing so. And just got word that we have Christopher Williams instead of Jay and Shauna for the community panelists to represent them. And I believe that is all that I have for housekeeping. So without further ado, let's jump into the panelist Q&A.
Thank you for coming, everyone. As I said, I'm going to be asking questions in place of Selma, who isn't with us tonight. And so we're going to take a slightly different format. What we wanted to do was we had different topics that got brought up in the last meeting. And we wanted to talk about those different topics and first ask our community members how they feel about different issues, and then follow up with our court staff. Like Ruba said, we'll reserve the last half hour to identify ways we could take action to address some of the issues we've been talking about. So one of the things I wanted to start with is one of the reoccurring themes we heard last week, and I often hear generally both in my practice in life as a citizen, is that when individuals have an experience where they feel like racism occurred, they often feel like they don't have an outlet or any place that they can report it to. Specifically, I remember Shauna telling a story last month how she had been arrested by the same or stopped by the same officer, I think 7 times. And she felt there was no one to report this race-based action to. And so starting with the community members, how do you envision, what kind of process do you envision that could be in place in order to create an outlet to report these experiences to?
I'm just gonna, Hannah, if you can just give us 1 second. I sincerely apologize. Our community members are running a little late. So they're just walking in, so I'm just gonna have you repeat the question.
I
apologize. Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but you sound not like yourself. You have a very weird echo to you.
Can't hear none of them.
Try talking now, Sarafia.
How does it sound now?
A little bit better. Why don't I repeat the question, and then if the echo is still there, we can take a minute break and see if you can address it.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, we can hear you. It seems like there's a little bit of an echo, but we can hear you. Should I go ahead and repeat the question, Sarafia? All right. So welcome. You must be Chris in the background there, as there's a new face. So welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us. I'm Hannah. I'm one of the moderators. What I was saying is one of the things we have been talking about is individuals feel like they have a negative situation where racism occurred, and oftentimes there's no outlet, no process in place to report the incident to. So the first question was for the community members is, what kind of process do you envision that could exist within the court system to report situations that feel are based on racism?
I'm sorry, if you guys can hear me, we're just having a little bit of technical difficulties and I'm trying to resolve that now.
Yeah, go ahead and take your time, Sarafia. Maybe
move on to another question.
Yeah, maybe I'll move on to the court speakers. So I'll start with you, Judge Friday. Do you know if there's a process? This would really be for Judge Friday and Amy Turnquist. Do you know if the courthouse has a process in place where if an individual feels like a situation occurred that was based on their race or was racism, can they make a report regarding that situation?
And so it's my understanding in regards to something that's outside of a specific judge, which also I think that could also be handled, that there is a complaint process through court administration where somebody could file that complaint. And ultimately, my understanding is it would be reviewed if it was for court administration through court administration. But I'll definitely let Ms. Turnquist speak to that more. In regards to a judge, that complaint would go to the Board of Judicial, the Judicial Board. And it would be investigated if they found that there was cause to do so. It has happened in the past, in regards to that, but really in regards to an elected official, which is what judges are, that's not something that would process directly through the court system. It would go directly to the Board of Judicial Conduct for investigation. That information could be obtained from court administration in regards to how that's contacted. They also do have an online thing in regards to filing a complaint. And then within the courthouse, it's not just the judges, and court staff. Also, that's where a lot of attorneys make their living. And attorneys have their own oversight board, which is the Office of Lawyers Professional Responsibility. And then there's a board also, which is the Lawyers Professional Responsibility Board. And they also have a very easy online form that a complaint can be filed against an attorney. So that everybody's aware is that any judge or attorney that acted in a way that would implicate racism, that is a violation and would be more than likely investigated. In regards to the other individuals of the executive branch that come in contact, police officers and the like, I honestly can't speak to that. It's a different branch of government. In regards to if an individual heard testimony, for example, of an officer and believed that it was race-based or believed that the underlying arrest was race-based or otherwise in some way profiling, I'm not sure what the process is in regards to that. I'll admit I should be aware of it, but I'm not. And I really can't speak as to the executive branch. Amy, is there anything that you want to add in regards to court administration's process?
No, you really said it very well. Certainly you can write, do any formal complaint to me as the court administrator, and I can help process that complaint or move it forward along the line, if you will.
If there's a complaint against a municipal police officer, what I have told clients in the past to do is that every municipality on the range has an appointed police civil service commission appointed by the city council. The city where I live has one, and so I've told people go and file a complaint through the appointed police civil service commission. But of course, the problem with that, with some people, it becomes a catch-22 because they say, well, what are they going to do about it? They're supervised by a city council, appointed by a city council. They're just going to protect the law enforcement officers. So if one has inherent distrust in those machineries and processes, it's not. But that's the answer I've given to clients over the many years of my career is you do have that recourse through the police civil service commission within the municipality, and of course I never hear the results of that, and oftentimes the clients don't call back and say, hey, I did it or I didn't do it, but I've given that piece of advice over the years.
Mark, what about the
Oops.
Oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, this is Jennifer Hoffman-Sackman, and I'm a city councilor in Hibbing. And the Hibbing does have a Hibbing Human Rights Commission as well, that they could bring those issues forward.
Oh, good.
And Hannah,
Thank you.
this is Kim McLaughlin, and I don't know.
Color are on that Hibbing Human Rights Commission?
I believe there are 6. There are 6 members that are appointed by the city council.
How many people of color are on that commission?
I am not aware. I do not know that, Sarifia, at this time. I'm sorry. We did appoint a couple more, so that I do know that there are 6. And of
Just
course,
6 members.
correct. Correct. And that's set by the city ordinance.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Hannah, this is
Go
Kim
ahead.
McLaughlin. I'm not on the community panel, but in my life as an auditor, I know that the Office of the Legislative Auditor has I'm going to just call it a whistleblower way to report electronically. And I know just because sometimes it's really difficult for folks to step forward. It's not in our human nature to want to do that, whether it's racism or any other complaint. But I do know that that does get used. And I don't know if there could be a similar vehicle that could be implemented for folks, to report if they, have an allegation. And or I know the Office of the Legislative Auditor also does a really good job vetting those questions and getting them to the right agency, or getting those concerns to the right agency. So that might be something to think about.
Okay. So Kim, do you know if you made a complaint to the Office of the Legislative Auditor on any entity, they would be able to help you direct it to the right source?
Well, that's what I don't know, how far reaching it is, or if they only, I think they have jurisdiction over certain state agencies. But what I don't know is if they received a complaint about a municipality, if they would then just forward that information on. I suspect they would, or they would try to point the individual, if they could reply. I suspect they would try to point the individual to down the right path.
Yes, let me say something. I think it was a couple years ago. Me and my younger brother tried to make a complaint to the police department about what they were doing. It wasn't easy. They gave us the runaround, gave us numbers to call and Duluth. If you have complaints, they gave me the runaround. It wasn't an easy process. It's not encouraged. So there's no follow-up. And really, there really ain't no transparency for anybody to make a complaint to know if anything happened. And I think that's so I hear what you're saying, but I don't know if anybody here has actually tried to make a complaint before. It's an owner officer or something like that, like we did. It's not easy. It's not met. It's met with malice and deceit and misdirection. So it's not easy. Just wanted to let that be known.
Thanks for sharing that, Nathaniel. One thing I'm hearing is, from what you're saying, is there may be a need for increased opportunities to make complaints electronically in order to ensure everyone has the chance to have their voices heard. One follow-up question I had for you, Amy, do you know if the 6th Judicial District has an electronic complaint process, or would that be done in person?
There is an email that you can contact the courts, and that goes through a state email system that will be forwarded to the district. So it goes to more of a state level. So you certainly can lodge a complaint that way. It's really available for any questions that you would have. We also have a process for just in our district to electronically submit a question or a complaint also. So it's basically an email route. So I suppose it wouldn't be completely anonymous, but it's a process.
It's a start to making it a little easier to make a complaint. One follow-up question I had for you, Mark, before we move on to Kim is, if someone had a complaint about a specific experience with their public defender, who would they best contact?
Well, there is a chain, I don't want to say chain of command, but if there's a complaint about their defender, if it is a public defender working in the courthouse in Hibbing, Virginia, or Carlton, the person would be me. And if it is a different person, if it's in the courthouse in Duluth, Two Harbors, or Grand Marais, and if the complaint is about me, myself, for whatever reason, then it would go to the chief 6th Judicial District Public Defender, Dan Liu, who's based in Duluth. So Dan Liu is the chief, and I supervise Hibbing, Virginia, and Carlton, and then Nicole Bettendorf Hops supervises Duluth, Two Harbors, and Grand Marais. So that's so on the range. Those complaints against the public defender would come directly to me, and then I would very likely then forward them to Mr. Liu, and we would work together to address the issue.
Thanks, Mark. I know that the Public Defender's Office has a website. Do you know if this information is on the website?
The specific information I do not believe is on the website, but that website is managed by the Administrative Services Office in Minneapolis, which is where the sort of the headquarters of public defense is in the state of Minnesota. And I certainly can bring that up to the Administrative Services Office to put that on there for each of the judicial districts. And I certainly would take simply a phone call probably to do that, but that certainly can be done.
Okay, thanks for sharing, Mark. So
Yes.
moving on to Kim from the County Attorney's Office. Kim, as you know, county attorneys have a lot of authority or power in making both charging decisions, but also decisions relating to plea offers and dispositional departures. And so do you know if your office has a process for an individual to make a complaint if they feel like they have an experience with a prosecutor that they think was racist or based on their race?
We don't have a formal process, but much like Mark described with the Public Defender's Office, there are division heads in each division of the County Attorney's Office that are available to take complaints about any of the prosecutors, civil division attorneys, or public health and human services attorneys that work for the office. Like I said, I'm the head of the civil division. On the range, we have Carl Sundquist. In Duluth, we have Nate Stummy, and for Public Health and Human Services, we have Ben Stromberg. All of our names and contact information are available on the County Attorney website. And if, again, like one of the complaints is about one of us division heads, you can reach out directly to Mark Rubin, the County Attorney. I would say, too, that, the county is a big entity, and we have a lot of departments that manage HR, administration, and things like that. And the county is undertaking some pretty significant diversity, equity, and inclusion work right now. And we are looking for ways to ensure that that we're an employer and a provider of services with equity in mind, and to remove any kind of barriers that might exist for people reaching that equity. And so this information is really is good for me because I'm part of that group. And I think as we go forward and look for ways to make our processes better, this reporting is important. So I appreciate this conversation. But I think if anybody didn't feel comfortable reaching out to the county attorney's office, they could reach out to county administration or county HR, and the contact information for both of those departments are available on the county's website as well.
Thanks for sharing, Kim. Now turning to the community members, we spoke some last month about some of the frustration and not having an outlet to make a complaint when you feel that racism has occurred within the criminal justice or judicial system. Hearing some of the responses that we just heard, do you have any thoughts on additional processes that could be in place in order to make it more meaningful to make a complaint of racism? Are you there, Sarathia?
Yes,
There she is.
Yeah, we're here. Hi, this is Jay. How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Well, what I did notice today, speaking about
I can't really hear you today.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
Okay. I seen today where Range Mental had hooked up with Virginia PD, Officer Swanson, community advocate, and responding to more calls that handles more like mental illness and whatnot. That part of the step in the direction that you are looking to go, the overall process like that.
You're kind of, at least for me, you were kind of cutting in and out.
Basically, what she's asking. So last time Shauna had said that the officer was profiling the system of so they were discussing like the different ways, like what could be done differently so that that can be reported, therapy, and so hearing the things that people in the reports had to say, is there anything you guys have to add to that you feel can be done better to handle situations like that?
If you want to answer that too when they get done.
Officers involved.
I guess it would be the officers involved being able to speak up. Because a lot of times you could see on the officer's face that was assisting the officers, they were just, they seen that it wasn't right, you know, or they weren't agreeing with the whole situation. But nothing was said or along the process up to the court and the whole system until I got charged.
It's Jay here again. I think kind of following up on what Sean is saying is I think that the officers on scene seeing this racism being going on, they should be held accountable at the same as that officer who has committed that, because they're standing there watching this. And they're supposed to be serving and protecting and upholding the law, and that's part of the problem too. Whereas if they need to be held accountable as well, not only just the officers, the judicial system itself. When they sit back and allow these things to happen, it's a process of getting it rectified when it shouldn't be a process. When you see it clearly, it is violating the rights, the amendment rights of a human being walking through, especially people of color. There's no reason why we should be continue being profiled, because wherever area we're at, there should be no profiling like that, none whatsoever. And until we take it all the way to the top, starting with you and letting it spread on through, then we'll get stuff done. I mean, I do appreciate the time spent, but it is time for action, and everybody's seeing it. Like my old phrase I use, Ray Charles could see this himself. So we have to continue to go forward and hold the people, not only just the police, our legislators accountable, because they are there to serve us as the people. We are their constituents that send them there. So everybody has to have accountability. Because an offender, he is held accountable throughout his career, throughout his life. That accountability should be applied to our judicial system, our legislators, all the way up to the top. They cannot afford to keep turning their eye and using the ethics word to, I say, abstain from the situation.
Thanks for sharing, Jay. We only have an hour to talk about different topics, and I want to move on to our next topic because this is something you brought up at the last forum, Jay. You talked about education as a barrier, and this is something that really struck home with me because lots of times I think I spend a lot of time reading about racism, but maybe the impact of me reading about it is kind of illusory if it doesn't have any real world impact to make change. And so I wanted to talk a little more about education as a barrier to changing or addressing racism. And Jay, how do you think that educating the public on racism could be done better than how it currently is in our society?
Well, there should be a curriculum in the school to learn about the culture, for one thing. And the next thing is the deficit thinking that society has upon people of color. They're already prejudged when you meet them. And we have to eradicate that part. through the school system, that will help a lot. The teaching of our history, not of the past, but of our future right now, because this is our future and what is really going on in our future as people of color. That's part of teaching that. The media plays a big part in everything. I'm sure you know that the media plays a big part. How we are viewed through the media. And it's engraved in some people's head through the way of teaching. Not fearing the individual, but fearing the color of that person's skin. And not giving him the benefit of the doubt to be, let an individual know who he is, really truly is. It's always that prejudgment, that content prior to investigation. So until we start putting that in our school system, then we're stalling ourselves, because it has to begin through the younger generation on up. So each and everybody can understand what people of color go through. Because a lot of it, racism is taught. It is taught. And it's taught in the household, and it's taught in schools by way of action. That action is seeing things that's wrong, but not standing up and speaking. See, that I think integrity means seeing things when nobody's around, being able to do the right thing, do what's right. So it all starts with all that. Even our teachers, again, that reverts back to our deficit thinking. If they think we're not going to learn, or we don't want to learn, it's already implanted in the psychological aspect. This is a big problem.
I'm just going to add to what Jay's saying real quick. Cultural education outside of the month of February and Cinco de Mayo would be great. You know, we celebrate holidays all throughout the year in the school system, you know, but we stick all of the cultural education into these small areas of time throughout the year. And so we need to start expanding that and having that cultural education throughout the year instead of keeping it to a month or just a day throughout the year.
And let me follow up on, and even look, like I work for the school system, and I actually questioned the class of Emmett Till. No one can tell me about Emmett Till. So not only is the cultural loss, it's in a sense hidden, and it needs to come out more, all the way up to these times that she was speaking on, Cinco de Mayo and everyone else. People have to know these things. That way they can get to understand who we really are. Because as long as we keep that barrier, like I said, that again, we bring back that depth of thinking of what the media portrays us, it stalls us, and we can't get over that. And again, when we see our leaders, our politicians start looking at themselves in the mirror and saying, okay, but it's time for me to do the right thing, then that's when them doors will open up and we see each other clear.
Having our educational materials come from people of color. That's another thing.
Sarafia, if I heard you correct, did you say educational materials from people of color?
Correct.
Okay. So just to turn now to some of our, what I keep referring to as our kind of court-related speakers, does anyone have any thoughts on how your different entities could better train your staff and yourselves on issue of racism in light of some of the thoughts that Jay shared with us today and Sarafia shared in his thoughts from the last forum?
Yeah, so I can't speak for the judiciary, but I can definitely speak for myself. First of all, I think that Jay and Sarafia are dead on. Jay mentioned a number of words, profiling, prejudged, those type of things. Racial profiling is already against the law in Minnesota, yet we all know that it still happens. Why does it happen? You can have a perfect, and I'm not saying we do, but you could have a perfectly racial neutral system. But if the people that are applying that system are racist, you're still going to end up with racist results. And so I really heard Jay and Sarafia talking about the endemic issue, which is the learned or taught racism that is very much imbued into white culture, through all kinds of things. And so I do believe that education piece is vitally important. But I think that the issue with the education piece has ultimately been that the education piece has derived from white culture about the culture of people of color, which ultimately just reinforces a systemic failure and an endemic failure. And so in regards to the judicial system and the profession of law itself, first of all is our education needs to come and be sought from people of color that have that experience. It can ultimately attempt and hopefully be successful in teaching us a better relation to the culture and respect and understanding of it. But on the other side of that, when I was in college, a sophomore in college, Spike Lee spoke at our college. And during the question and answer, he was asked, and Gustavus Adolphus College, where I went, is almost entirely white. And somebody got up and asked the question, Mr. Lee, what can we do to basically improve diversity on this campus? And he leaned into the microphone and said, get more Black people here. And at first I kind of thought, that he was just kind of a flippant response and that type of thing. But over the years, I absolutely believe he was dead on right. It's really difficult to have a real connection to what it can be taught without also having that personal connection. And so the judicial branch, the legal profession, we just got to do a better job at attracting people of color to our profession. The responsibility isn't with the people of color to say, I want to go into that. It's our responsibility to be open, encouraging, and promoting that. And ultimately, when there is a time where the bar in Minnesota is reflective of the community of Minnesota, and for that matter of the country, that's where that education can ultimately really be impactful. But at this point in time, it really begins, I agree, is that early education, in the schools, that type of stuff. I mean, particularly here on the Iron Range, when our populations of people of color are significantly small compared to the overall population. We've got to work twice, if not harder than twice as hard, to address those issues. And so I don't have a perfect answer or a great answer other than we've got to do better with it. And really the first step in that is reaching out to those communities and say, hey, listen, when it comes to some of these things, I'll admit I'm an idiot because of my prior learning. Would you please teach me? And we just don't do a good job of doing that.
Thanks for sharing, Judge.
Pretty much everybody here agrees with everything that Judge Friday just said.
Hannah, can I talk a little bit too?
Yeah, please do, Kim.
Okay. I'm on the Equal Justice Committee in the Duluth courts. I'm based out of Duluth, but I grew up on the range. And so I care a lot about what's going on up there. But Amy and I are working on an internship subcommittee through the Equal Justice Committee down in Duluth. And what we're trying to do is create an internship where we can work with the College of St. Scholastica to bring a person of color to have an internship at the courts. And the reason that we're doing that is we're trying to just introduce more opportunity and to make the courts more accessible to people of color and to hopefully get more people working at the courts so that the people that are working there at all levels, not just attorneys and judges, but behind the desks doing IT, all the different roles that are at the courts, that people can start to see, hey, there's a place for me there. And our work is in its infancy. We're just trying to get it set up. But another thing that we do down in Duluth is that we have, once a year, we have, I forget the exact name of it, but it's something about Consider the Courts. And we work with the Fond du Lac tribe in their high school to bring kids to the courts, and they get to talk to attorneys, judges, bailiffs. They get to go around and see the different areas of the courthouses. And by doing that, hopefully we're starting down that path of showing that there's opportunity for other people and people of all colors and ethnicities and races to come and get work at the courts. And I know the people on the Equal Justice Committee down in Duluth are really dedicated to that. And if we find something that works down in Duluth, we'd be happy to work with the courts up north as well to get it set up there.
Thanks for sharing, Kim. Mark or Amy, is there anything you'd want to add to that discussion?
Well, in one thing, Jay brought up the story of Emmett Till, and you need to get that in the social studies curriculum at all. That that needs to be taught through the social studies curriculum in 9th, 10th grade. So, I mean, I'm familiar with the story of Emmett Till, as many of us are, but I do echo what Jay says. There is a partnership with a lot of this in the public schools as well, and that's where it all starts. It all starts with education of education of our young people. One thing in our profession, in the law, that that a lot of people have said, it needs to be changed, is that when you have a law license, you have to get yourself 45 credits of continuing education every 3 years to keep your license. And only 2 of those 45 credits are referred to as elimination of bias credits. And a lot of people say that, for lawyers to keep their license, they should have, what that basically is, that equivocates to about 1 3-hour class. And a lot of people say that 1 3-hour class is simply not enough, that 2 credits out of 45, it should be more than 2. And I happen to agree with that. Now that is set by a particular commission of the, it's not a commission, it's a board. It's an arm of the Minnesota Supreme Court is what it is. It sets all those requirements and things. So, our profession can do a lot more in that regard. And I think that's one good place to start, is make the elimination of bias requirement more than 2 credits out of 45.
I'm sorry, I just have a question quick. Are those state requirements?
Yes. They're required by the Minnesota Supreme Court, which is the 3rd branch of our state government. They're required by the Minnesota Supreme Court for lawyers to keep their license, that they have to have 2 credits of elimination of bias to keep their license. Yeah, that's set by the Supreme Court. Their board. It's
So
you know what it's called? I'm forgetting. It's called the Board of Continuing Legal Education. That's the name of it. The name was escaping me at the time. I see Hannah and Judge Friday nodding their head. I think I got it right. It's the Board of Continuing Legal Education that sets that.
Go ahead, Amy.
I just wanted to kind of echo what Kim had said, and the state court administration office and the Supreme Court heads a committee for equal justice, and they have many goals and pieces of their mission that really try to improve the diversity and inclusion educational programs. So we're just starting really to see that take off. It certainly has been long in coming and is not by any means as far as we want to go with it, but our equal justice committees on the range and in Duluth really are starting to ramp up, and we're gaining more momentum. And just an example of what's happening here tonight is really a good start. I mean, certainly we have a lot of work to accomplish, but keep talking about it and bringing it up and finding ways we can think of more educational opportunities. I think it's just the beginning.
I agree, Amy. I think these conversations are a really good way to begin the work that needs to be done on this issue. I see a question in our chat that would be for Amy or Kim, and that would be, someone asked if the internship that you're creating with St. Scholastica, if that's a paid internship.
I can field that. We are working to secure funding, and our plan is that it will be. And we're aware that oftentimes unpaid internships can have a greater burden on people of color. And so as a group that is concerned with racial equity, we don't want to contribute to that burden. So it's been something we've been working on for a couple months here now.
Thanks, Kim. I think this would be a question best for Amy. Someone has in our Pigeonhole chat a question if the court system tracks outcomes based on the race of the individual. And I feel like I've read or seen some of the reports coming out of the court system. So if you could explain to us what that tracking looks like and how it can be accessed.
So we track the race of defendants and juveniles. It's self-reported race so that the data is available. We don't really correlate it to specifically the disposition on a case, but there are some reports that are being developed now to look at, the number of people of color that were charged with the different types of crimes. So how many people were charged with, a felony crime against a person, how many of those were white, how many of those were people of color. And then, we also look at conviction rates. I'm not really sure what information is available at this point. I have not seen anything recently that's been published, but I can look into that and see. There was some reports that were, pre-COVID, we were kind of on track to get some reporting, but then COVID happened, so we haven't. But I can look into that a little further. There are also reports out on the sentencing guidelines website that does track some of those dispositions. So that might be another place to go get that information.
Thanks for sharing, Amy. Kim, do you know if your office tracks either departures or plea bargains based on the race of the individual?
No, we don't. When we get a referral from law enforcement, if the referral has a race designation, we'll put that into our system, but we don't do any sort of tracking specifically as to dispositions related to race.
So we have about, get my watch working, we have about 10 minutes before we're going to move to more specific action step conversation. And so I had some specific questions for individuals that are both coming up in the chat and that are questions that have been on my mind. And so Judge Friday, a lot of them pertain to the court system. And I think, it's a well-known statistic that people of color are disproportionately charged with crimes. And once that case comes into your court, do you have any discretion to dismiss that case if you feel like an individual is being targeted based on their race? Or do you have any authority to address what you believe would be race targeting in a charge? Oh, you're on mute, Judge.
I apologize. The simple answer is no. Ultimately on lower level crimes, and I have, be honest, done this, is that, misdemeanor, that type of thing. If I think that there's something fishy about it, I'll dismiss it because the prosecutors usually aren't there at arraignments. They are now. So it's a little bit more difficult, and say, bring it back if you really think there's a case here. Ultimately, the to dismiss a case, which is under Rule 3001 of the Criminal Rules of Procedure, is generally at the request of the prosecutor. The court, in only few instances, has the authority to act. Sorry, I'm going to use a Latin term, sua sponte, which means on its own accord. Generally, we can only act if one side or the other asks us to. So meaning either the defendant or the state makes a request of the court, then the court can act on it. Ultimately, the court has absolutely no ability to decide what cases the prosecuting authority brings before it and charges out. That ultimately rests with the executive branch. Ultimately, the judicial branch is there for the determination in regards to it, or the refereeing, I guess, for the lack of a better term, of the jury trial. And so there really is limited authority for the court to address that by basically saying, I'm dismissing this matter. Now, if there was something that appeared so blatant to me that was, within the police reports, we've seen it occasionally in warrants, we definitely can raise complaints in regards to that, to whether it be the county attorney's office or the public defender's office. I'll be honest, in a couple of the instances, it was kind of surprising, one, that the county attorney's office, or shouldn't say county because I can't remember if it was exactly, the prosecuting authority actually allowed the language to stay in there, and that the defense attorneys didn't raise it. And so there is some ability to do that, but not to the draconian level. Draconian makes it sound negative. Not to the positive level of being able to say, the court doesn't like this, so we're just dismissing it.
I just want to make sure to clarify something. So if the defense raises that concern, that's part of it. So if the defense raises that concern, is that something that the court can consider then, or is it just if the prosecution brings that forward?
And so it could be raised by either side. And don't get me wrong, I do believe that overall our county attorneys are very good at self-policing, so I wouldn't be necessarily surprised if it was raised by a county attorney. But in most instances, I think that you're absolutely right. It would really rest with the defendant to raise that issue based on whatever the defendant was reporting to their attorney. And so they're the ones that could ultimately raise the issue to the court as a violation of their rights.
So to circle a step backwards in my mind, because the individual would have contact with law enforcement, and then the reports would be made to the county attorney's office, and then it would go to Judge Friday. So Kim, what discretion does your office have, or ability does your office have to address a situation where it may be that an officer is targeting someone based on race?
Well, first I'm going to just say I practice in the civil arena, so criminal is not my forte, but I know a little bit about it. So to the extent that I do know, I'll speak to that, and then just say that if anybody has any questions that I'm not able to answer, I'd be happy to get in touch with some of my prosecutor brothers and sisters in my office here, and we will be happy to answer any questions that you might have that I can't answer today. But what I will say is that when the prosecutors get the reports from law enforcement, they can look at them and go back and look for more information, ask for additional investigation, or choose not to file charges if they want to. They get to make a decision on every referral that comes into our office. So if they see something that just doesn't sit right with them, they don't have to file a case. The other thing that I think is important to know is that if the prosecutors do feel that there's enough in the reports and the investigatory materials that they get from law enforcement, they put together some charges. Before those charges are able to go forward, both the law enforcement checks off on them and a judge checks off on them for probable cause. And so it's not that prosecutors can just go ahead and file whatever charges might come their way. There are some checks built into the system.
And we have various I'll call them procedural devices under the Minnesota Rules of Criminal Procedure that we can use as defenders to call that we can, it happens most frequently in a felony case. It's called a contested omnibus hearing. And in a misdemeanor case, it's called a contested Rasmussen hearing. And through those procedures, we can litigate vigorously. And we have a great team of defenders. We have 5 public defenders who work in Hibbing Courthouse and 5 who work in the Virginia Courthouse. And I carry a half-time caseload in addition to my administrative responsibilities, which is in the Virginia Courthouse. And we litigate that's the purpose of those hearings, is to determine whether the defendant's constitutional rights have been violated, and then what the remedy should be. Should it be dismissal based on lack of probable cause, suppression, whatever? So, and my team of defenders does a great job at litigating. They're very experienced. We have very, very experienced defenders up here, and we all work well together. And I do want to echo what Judge Friday said earlier, that our team, the prosecutors that our office deals with here on the range, are very good at we get along. Let's put it that way now. But we get along. We all have jobs to do, but we get along. Ethics are important to everybody. And a good prosecutor is what I'll call a minister of justice. And if there was a violation of a defendant's rights in some way, shape, or form, a good prosecutor will oftentimes take I'm not going to charge the case, whatever. It's called prosecutorial discretion. So we work in a healthy, productive system in that regard up here, where we all value ethics. We value that the defendant's rights are protected. I've been working in the system up here for 27 years, I think in total, and I've practiced nowhere else. And but you learn something every day, and I'm not a person who's ashamed to be a lawyer. You hear some people, oh, you're a lawyer. I think it's a noble profession. It's a public service profession, and I'm proud to be a member of it.
Thanks for sharing, Mark. We're getting close to 7 o'clock. And before we move to action steps, I wanted to circle back to the VEMA members and see if you have any thoughts that you want to follow up with on that discussion or anything else before we move to more action steps.
Quick. Can we get a quick question in from VEMA?
That's what she just said.
Okay. This for just the gentleman who's speaking on the violation on an individual in the court system, and said they wouldn't take the case or something.
So if a person's human rights were being violated, then they have the option not to prosecute that case, correct?
Correct. That's called prosecutorial discretion. The name for it is prosecutorial discretion.
Okay, I got that discretion. Okay, in that process right there, when you feel that way, is there any tally on this officer who was doing this to this individual? Is that being kept tab on?
So if you choose not to prosecute a case because someone's human rights were being violated, let's say by an officer, what happens then in regards to that officer? Is there a complaint made? Is there an offer to the defendant to make a complaint? Is there something on his record? Is it recorded somehow that that case was not prosecuted because that officer violated someone's human rights?
I can take a stab, and again, this is not where I practice, so I don't have intimate knowledge of what goes on when this happens. But I do know that for every case that our office declines to prosecute, we do prepare a memo and inform the law enforcement for the reasons why we're not accepting the case or charging it. And what happens to that officer from there, I'm not sure. And I don't know if there's anything that occurs in my office in terms of keeping track or anything like that. I don't have that knowledge. And so I would be happy to figure that out and get back in touch with you if you'd like.
If I may say, I would say on behalf of myself, that's something that's very important, because I'm gonna have to just say this here. Probably if they had kept track and did what they're supposed to do, George Floyd would be with us today. And this is the type of thing that lead to these actions on people of color. Either it's waiting to have numbers brought out on it, or processing it, or there's some way that impede the proper procedure that's need to be done.
Well,
See, a lot of this could be avoided.
And
the
one
other
thing,
with
one
that too
thing,
is
Jay,
that
one thing that prevents that, and I'll deal with it, it's kind of an elephant in the room situation, is with the George Floyd situation. The police union is very strong in Minneapolis, and oftentimes the police union is involved in this discussion or dynamic that we're talking about too, and that reared its head in the Chauvin situation, how the police union protected him, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do, but not to be no distraction and none. But our justice system has brought down powerful gang members, and if the justice system can't go up against the police union, then we got a problem there. That needs to be addressed right there, because that's what what they're hiding behind. And like I said, accountability needs to go all the way up the line, not just partial to you, but beyond you and beyond your superiors, to get this eradicated, because we're still hitting these stop signs, and stop signs, that's not good. I mean, I'm in a sense pleading, let's get this really forward where it needs to go, because these steps we're taking is good, but we need more of a elevator instead of a step. So that's basically what I have to say, and thank you so much.
I just wanted to say something to what Judge Friday was talking about earlier, when he was talking about a diverse community, and that one of the solutions to a lot of this is to get, like you said, to get Black people here, right? And we agree with that, and I think that part of that also is creating a community where people of color feel at home enough to be here, right? Because there's going to be one of two things, and we always prefer it to be both, but there's always going to be one of two things that are going to attract someone here. It's either going to be money or community. And if we can't offer them the type of money that's going to attract them here, then we need to be able to offer a community that's going to attract them here. And so part of that also is supporting organizations like BEMA and other organizations that are here to accomplish just that, to create a community, to help create a community where people of color do feel at home. And so I think that's a really big part of it. There aren't very many organizations out there like ours, especially on the Iron Range. And so I think that making sure that we're supporting those organizations is a huge part of that in the endeavors that they're doing, especially on the side of the city, like city councils, like the city itself. Obviously, like the Equal Justice Committee, working with and like partnering with us on something like this, that's a big part of it too. But we definitely need to, I believe we need to start holding, what we often hear people refer to as the higher ups accountable in a lot of this stuff, mainly being you know, the bosses of the department, right, which is the city, the mayor, etc. And so holding those entities accountable also is a huge part of all of this. And I want to say thank you for a lot of that information that we got in regards to like the Board of Continuing Legal Education and things like that. That was information that we didn't have, and that's stuff that's really important for us to know, even so that we can start taking things further and saying, you know, like you said, we need to have more than just 2 of those 45 credits, right? And so just giving us that information also, that's important. So thank you for that.
And I would just like to say I absolutely agree with everything that Sarafia just said. And I would love, Jay, to have the button to that elevator to push it in and take it to the top floor. You know, but the fact of the matter is some judge on the Iron Range isn't going to do or have any impact on the police union down in Minneapolis. But I do think that us as a group can have that impact or begin that impact on this community and maybe find an elevator that at least works on the Iron Range to make this, again, the money part. I don't know how we do that, Sarafia, but the welcoming community, I think that we can do. And I do think that organizations like VEMA are an important part in hopefully maybe not encouraging that change, not only just within the community members themselves, but also within the community government and the local government. That's really where, you know, we can be of an impact here. And I do believe that ultimately, if we can effectuate real change on the Iron Range, I really do think that ultimately that does have an impact on Duluth. I do think it has an impact in Grand Rapids. And I do believe that ultimately it does have an impact all the way down in St. Paul with the legislature. But to really try to figure out, are there steps that we can take to create that community that would be more attractive to people of color, so that ultimately maybe we can get to the root of some of that endemic racism, you know, that will ultimately impact the operating of our systems.
Yeah, and there are absolutely steps that we can take. Like I said, I think a big part of that is holding our city officials accountable for their inaction in a lot of that too, because, you know, at the end of the day, the real truth of it is that if we don't welcome diversity onto the Iron Range, it will die. And so, you know, and so in that, not only are we, you know, helping to better the education system, the justice system, but we're also just, you know, just the economy and all of it. It's really just all, it really all comes together as one. So
I think we easily streamed into the last portion of the tonight's event, which is the action planning. I do, first of all, want to thank the panelists for their time and input for the last hour of tonight. It was really fruitful conversation. And I do want to encourage any of the other members in the Zoom space to share whatever action plans that they have thought of from tonight's event. I do ask that you keep it between like 1 to 2, just a few minutes, just so that we have time to hear from everyone who wishes to speak. And if you do wish to speak, you can try either raising your hand or using the reaction raise hand button in the Zoom space, or you could DM either Hannah or me so we can make sure that we know who would like to speak. And it looks like Leah, I believe, has her hand raised.
Yes, thank you. I live at Greedy. I don't live on the range, but I taught at Mesabi Range College on the range, and I taught at Rainy River, which isn't on the range, but I participated in some meetings, focus group meetings, large focus group for community economic development, where every periodically they have to gather data to see what to spend federal money on. And the talk was about what do the communities need in the 7-county Arrowhead region. And it was done by the Arrowhead Regional Development Council and in conjunction with the IRRB. And those are entities that should know about what you're talking about, what this group is talking about, and what VEMA and the people in the community are asking for. Because I participated in the Koochiching County discussion, which was similar in this point in all 7 counties, where they said they need to be a welcoming community and they need to address racism, because these counties will not grow and thrive economically without new people. The rural parts are losing population. They need younger people. They need innovators. They need people with new ideas, and that's going to be people of color. Many of those will be people of color. So that's an important sort of establishment group to work with to address what you're talking about, Sarafia, about getting really the power structure, the power elite, to be speaking out, as this is that dealing with racism is an important part of being a vital living community.
Say one more thing, and this may sound a little bold to some folks, but I believe that we, even us as an organization, have continued to say, we're tired of talking. We want to know what's going to be done. And so at this point, we've gotten to the point where it's kind of like we listen to county commissioners and city officials that are elected into office continue to talk about changes that can be done, or continue to ask questions, what can we do? And so I would just like to propose that, if you're in a position like that and you have the ability to, and you're that serious about it, hand it off to a person of color. Hand that position off to a person of color, because it's just that time. It's just that time. And that's exactly what these communities need. So that's just my commission to you guys, I guess.
So I'll go ahead and hop in. I guess I'm kind of tend to be an organizer and planner. And so for me, the next action step, I would like to see members of both the subcommittee that organized this group, forum speakers on our forum, and community members, or anyone here just listening. I'd like to see us organize a committee to meet monthly to move forward some of these action plans. And so that we get some action out of this second forum, what I'm going to do is I'll put my email into the chat. And if anyone wants to email me that they want to have notice of further future meetings, I can start a listserv. And then what I would do is work with our Equal Justice Committee through the courthouse to figure out how we could get this group moving forward so we can begin to address some of the action steps that we're both talking about now and that we all know needs to occur. So I'll go ahead and put my email in there. And I'm pretty sure through our EJC group, we can make a community group happen to address some of this needed action. So anyone who wants to email me can, and when we can pick a date and time for this meeting to occur, I will give you notice of it. Who else? Does anyone else have? I mean, I know everyone has. What other ideas for action plans do people have, whether it's either a speaker or a community member that's in this forum listening?
So Hannah, this is Melissa Petrangelo-Skaya. So one thing I'd like to know, I did look at the Minnesota sentencing guidelines data for the 6th Judicial District, but part of it is that knowing people in power around here, that they want some data. And, I'd like to see us find out about the problems in terms of the numbers also. I looked on the sentencing guidelines website, and for example, in the 6th Judicial District, of all the felony convictions for people who identified as Black was 12.8%. I know that number is much higher than the population here, but so for those of you who do have public, agencies and data, I don't know what that would take, but I'd really like to see people find out what it would take.
Yeah, I think that it's important to have the data in order to understand the disproportionate impact and in order also to track our progress moving into the future. And I know from a little experience that all the entities track this data a little bit, but probably not to the extent that we could be tracking it. So I think that's a great suggestion. Sarafia, I'd like to hear from some more community members on just listing out different action steps or proposals. We have about 7 more minutes, so if you want to fire away, I'll take notes and then we can take the ideas forward to see how we can create change.
If not, I do have one thing that I wrote down from the discussion earlier. Not sure if the Sarafia, oh, okay, perfect. One of the things that Jay mentioned was accountability within the schools. I am aware that I think as of next year, they are planning to take Martin Luther King Day off. And that is a good step, but I was wondering if there are any efforts to, if there's a possibility to change the curriculum, at least in the social studies department, or just make that more of a requirement for students to learn more about racial equity and diversity in the schools. Because I think that was also brought up in some of the VEMA board meetings.
So this is Kim McLaughlin, and I can speak a little bit here because I'm on the Hibbing School Board. And much of our curriculum is governed at the state level or driven at the state level. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe, like, for example, the social studies curriculum is up for review. So I honestly don't have the target date in front of me, and I don't recall, but the social studies curriculum is up for review and modification. So I can speak to that. And yes, the Hibbing schools did make sure, that we adopted in next year's calendar Martin Luther King Day off.
That's good to hear, Kim. That's something that has long bothered me. Go ahead, Nathan.
Yeah, about what's in the schools. Teachers are able to teach outside sources and to teach other things than just what's in the curriculum. So, even so, I get what you're saying maybe that should be changed altogether, but individually, a teacher can teach things that are going on that's relevant to Black history from the past and to now without being forced to do it. If the teachers felt that's something that was important enough to do, just point that out. Thank you.
And I agree. And, I think there's been much conversation in our school around inclusiveness and equity. And I think, we're making steps. And so when they teach outside the curriculum, again, it's going to be an educational process. Absolutely. And I think our school is very supportive of that. And again, I can speak for what the conversations have been in Hibbing. I can't speak for other districts.
How open do you think the school district would be to an organization? Oh, am I on mute? No, an organization like ours coming in and having conversations with the teachers, like say we came in and had a conversation with like the students of color in the school, just to see like what kinds of things that they're facing and dealing with and struggling with when it comes to racial issues in the school. individually, like for that individual school. And then having a conversation with the teachers about, about those things that are said by the students. How open do you think the school district is?
I feel as though our district is very open to ideas. I mean, certainly it would have to be in some organized fashion, and whether that was an assembly, whether it was at a early out day where we were having a training session for faculty and staff. But I believe that there's a curriculum committee, certainly our administrative team, certainly our school board. We have a public session at every school board meeting. It's a 5-minute session, but I absolutely believe that our district is open and willing to listen to ideas and proposals. I believe that.
Just to follow up a little bit on that, Keith Turner, who's one of our subcommittee members, and I don't think he's on here tonight, but Serapia, you've met him and you may want to follow up with him, because I know today he was training, and he's a person of color, and he was training in Southridge, and I believe he's also done some training on racism in the Mountain Iron Buell School District, and I think he's certainly open to doing his training program in any school district in the area, and I think part of it is grant funding, so he might be a good person to follow up more regarding what that program looks like exactly. And Serapia, I know you have his contact, so you can do that.
Thanks.
We have about 6 minutes left, so if anyone else wants to share some ideas of action plans, I would love to take a little bit of that 6 minutes to hear about some other ideas.
And this is Kim McLaughlin again, and I work at the college. So, within our college system, I see a lot of people of color, athletes in particular. And it seems as though a number of years ago, probably decades ago now, when we brought athletes into our area, we connected them with a family in the area to help integrate them into the community. So, while I'm hearing all these structural kinds of things that have to happen, we can't force change on our community. And I think it also has to start at the foundational level. And I think if you can pair athletes, students of color, with families into the community, I think that helps drive change and acceptance and understanding at the foundational level as well. So while we might say, we need all these policy changes and changes at the city level, which that's one piece of it, but I think part of it is just community acceptance and comfort. So I think there's maybe multiple ways that we have to start driving this change. And again, in addition to what's happening at our schools, so when our little people, our little folks grow to be adults, it's going to be just, hopefully a natural thing where we're all accepted. So I think that's a piece of it too.
It sounds like the idea behind that is basically acclimating them to the Iron Range community, which is part of the problem, right? This is part of the reason why people of color never feel at home here, no matter how long they've lived here, is because they're expected to acclimate to the community that's already here, rather than the community changing to right, rather than the community changing to accept them for who they are, including their culture and their ethnicity and all of those things. So if we're just placing, let's say, a student of color with a family so that they can be acclimated into the community, we're not appreciating their culture, we're not appreciating their ethnicity, they're not feeling at home, right? And this is something that the community does need to just change now. That it's been long enough. It's been long enough, and we've been talking about it long enough. The community, and especially the heads of the communities, need to just do it, right? I mean, that's why we're here, right? It just needs to be done. We just need to start doing what is necessary to make these changes.
Well, can I also add, exactly what you just said, and following what she said, because it's like continue taking us down this one-way street. We have to adjust to this lifestyle, but we're talking about a two-way street. We're meeting each other halfway, and it's like say when you're placing them in these households, it's like they're on that one-way path. So it has to be a two-way street.
Well, I'm sorry if that's the way it came across, but like I feel as though by engaging in those relationships, I would learn as well, and I think we would end up in a middle ground. But to just say we just have to do it, I mean, I feel I need to be educated as well. I mean, I don't know different cultures, and I would be the first to admit that. So I feel like the more I can learn, and others in the community, we are all going to end up in a better place, kind of in a middle ground, and a new understanding of one another. So
you have a point, but have you ever been in a situation just where have you ever been to a community that you moved in that was predominantly Black? Just you?
No.
Do you think that maybe because we've been here and done it, I've been over here for 25 years, started out in Ely, Minnesota. Do you think maybe that we might have an idea of what that feels like? I'll just take that as a yes. So when we hear something that everyone's open to hearing everything that anybody got to say, but when we hear something that doesn't work, and it's like saying, hey, try this, and we're like, but that doesn't work, and we keep meeting that resistance, like, I don't know, but really, if you're really listening, you're asking people what do they need, what do they feel they need to change, and they give it to you, and then it's not done, and it's held up, and it's staggered, and it's just like, okay, well, what's the point of asking these groups of people what they feel they need if you're not gonna do it? It's kind of counterproductive, but I do agree with what you're saying. That is a good idea. I mean, you want to put them with, but there's some problems with that. So instead of just sticking to that idea, well, we should do this, it's like, okay, do that and this and this and this, whatever everybody's suggested, and let's just do it. It's no reason to not being done, besides people just don't want to do it. They're resistant to it. They're resistant to that change, and that's really the Iron Range in general since I've been here. So I mean, I get that is the culture, but okay, but we do have the ability to start the change, to do it. Let's just show them how to do it. Yeah, we all hear the problems, we all hear the issues, we all bring something to the table. Okay, well, let's do something. I mean, or we can keep talking about it and, dragging it on like how we should do it, or we can just listen and do it. I mean, that's my 2 cents. Right? I mean, I don't have anything else to offer besides listening. So thank y'all for listening.
Thanks, Nathan. Just to follow up a little bit and wrap up, and what I really like about Kim's idea, Nathan, is it kind of reminds me a month ago when Jay talked about education as a barrier. Instead of like studying about systemic racism, why don't you just come hang out with a person of color? And I think that's so meaningful because I think how we really break down stereotypes is you meet and you engage and you talk to people and you build those relationships. And so what I love about your idea, Kim, is it's about building relationships and making connections and kind of stepping outside of what would be your natural community circle to meet more people. And so I think there's a lot of positives in that idea. And so we are a little past 7:30, and I do want to be respectful of everyone's time. And so what I'd kind of like to propose, like I said, is if anyone, and I'll put my email again into the chat, if anyone would like to be part of this effort going forward of creating change in the court system and in our communities, if they want to email me and get on the listserv, that would be awesome. And then also, if anyone has ideas that come to mind about action steps, whether it's as you're sitting at your desk or it's at night when you're just thinking about life, if you want to shoot me an email, just keep printing those emails off and start compiling a list for us. What I'd like to do from here is we'd set a meeting down the road for whoever's interested to join a committee and start taking action on some of these important issues. I just want to again thank everyone for being here. It's a beautiful night, and I'm sure there's a lot of things you could be doing outside or with your families, and I think it's really important that everyone's willing to take their time to have these discussions. And so I want to thank everyone for being here, and if no one else has any further follow-up, I will wrap up the meeting, but we can keep it open a few minutes so people can access my email in the chat in case they want to access it and get on my listserv. Thank you.
Yes, and we also like to thank HPAT for recording this session. It should be available online relatively shortly if anyone missed this event.
Thank you. Good night.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for coming.